this is our first video of a series, right? To try to respond to some questions that we received after our Safe Zone training. And so this one is going to be covering pronouns. And so we're here with Dr. Jon Humiston. Jon, could you talk a little bit about sort of, yourself and your expertise on this issue?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So I identify as non-binary. My pronouns are they, them, and their. And my dissertation work was on the campus climate and the experiences for transgender and non-binary students in higher education. So have a little bit of knowledge in the area, mostly through trial and error, because research has not, or at least when I was doing my dissertation work, had not caught up with the plethora of gender identities that are out there and that we're embracing within the transgender and non-binary communities. So yeah, but happy to
Fantastic.
talk with you here about navigating pronouns.
All right. And so, Jon, we had 8 questions that we sort of kind of, somewhat cobbled together from some different questions from participants at our Safe Zone training. So the first one that we have for you is, why are pronouns important?
Yeah. So pronouns are very personal, and anything that's personal means that it's integral to who we are. Pronouns are part of our identity, and being able to honor and respect people's identity means that pronouns are important, right? And so without that, you're saying, or without respecting someone's pronouns, you're saying that they're not important to me, your identity is not important to me, you don't matter to me. And so it's a short answer to a question that's very complex, but ultimately that's the reality. Is pronouns are important because they help identify who we are, and that's integral to authentically seeing another person.
Yeah, thank you for that. So isn't using they, them for a single person grammatically incorrect?
Wow, that's a great question. And while it sounds like it's grammatically incorrect, there is movement within like the APA manual that has recently come out and said they them pronouns are in singular form are correct. Merriam, the dictionaries are coming forward and saying it's not grammatically incorrect. English. I think if we looked through our history of literature, famous authors have been using they, them as singular pronouns throughout their writing. Shakespeare is a perfect example of using they, them as a singular in a grammatically correct way. And so while, yes, it feels odd to us sometimes to say, they, them in a singular way, because we're not used to doing it as much. It is grammatically correct. And I think if we actually stopped and thought about how often we'll point to, like, if somebody asked me, whose painting is on the wall behind Kevin, I might point to Kevin and say, well, it's theirs, without, meaning anything. And that's grammatically correct to say that. And we do it naturally without even realizing we're doing it. Who's left their bag? Oh, it's that person's over there. It's theirs. We've been doing it all along.
Mm-hmm. All right. So how can I politely ask people for their pronouns?
Yeah. So it's a concept that's scary for us because it's new, right? But it's so easy just to say, hi, my name is Jon Humiston. My pronouns are they, them, and their. You've introduced yourself as Kevin. Kevin, what are your pronouns? What pronouns do you use? It's as simple as that. It really is. But I think because we haven't had the practice of doing that, it just makes it seem scary. But I
Mm-hmm.
think you'll find that you develop much stronger and deeper relationships with other people if you can be vulnerable with them and actually engage with them on a deeper level, talking about their pronouns.
Fantastic. How do I course correct after I've misidentified a person or their gender or pronouns, or if I've used the wrong pronouns for a
Yeah.
person?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I wish there is an easy answer. It's just simply saying, I'm sorry, correcting yourself. Like, I'm sorry I said he, him. I meant to say she, her, um, and moving on, right? And so when I talked with students who participated in my dissertation research, many of them would talk about, I get it. Pronouns aren't easy for people. And so sometimes, especially if you've known me before I transitioned and you're working through this new concept of gender for me, I get that there's going to be some missteps. What I don't want to hear is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I keep misgendering you. I've had a really stressful day. I've got X, Y, and Z happening, and, it's just really hard for me right now, right? Don't make it about yourself. Just simply apologize. Just simply say, oh, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and move on. The person on the other end is going to take that much, much nicer than turning it around and making the whole mistake about you and your own experiences and how hard it is for you. Because I guarantee you, navigating life as someone who's transgender or non-binary in a very binary world is a lot more difficult than you trying to figure out how to appropriately use their pronouns.
Mhm. uh, what are some steps that we can do at Alma to normalize asking about pronouns or chosen names?
Yeah, so that's a complicated, a very multifaceted, complicated answer. Certainly, the easiest way or the low-hanging fruit is to introduce yourself with your pronouns, to put them in your email signatures, but also to recognize that there's a lot of privilege that comes along with that because it's a lot easier in climates that aren't always safe for vulnerable populations. It's really easy for someone to put, for a cisgender person to put their name and then their pronouns and their email signatures, where there's others who aren't sure how their pronouns are going to land if they're sending an email, if it's in their email signature, and what's that person going to think. So it's complicated, but the best thing that you can do is to start those conversations and to be an ally if you are cisgender for why you're including them and honoring for space for those who aren't yet ready to share their pronouns. Um, so that's one of the facets. The other is in terms of allowing students, faculty, and staff to self-identify within your systems, to identify different gender pronouns, to identify their chosen names, but to make sure the important thing is to make sure that the systems talk together. So one, my admission system changes and works with the student. I don't know if you all have Blackboard, but if it's your Blackboard system, that my chosen name somehow still shows up on the class roster. And um, that's really important to do because the students are going to recognize that, wait a minute, I thought you were trying to be inclusive, but now I'm being bumped because you're not really being inclusive. That's confusing to me. And that makes it seem like it's not as safe as you sort of led the climate to be. And then, can I trust being out? So that's, another facet. And the third that I would recommend is that while we want to embrace the use of pronouns, we need to always make space and take a step back for folks who aren't yet ready to share their pronouns. And I'll use a personal example. On the campus that I recently was working at, I was doing a residence life training, and residence life has run with and has embraced the use of pronouns in so many profound ways. But just prior to my going and working with Res Life to present a safe zone training, I had been with some colleagues who were making fun of folks who identified outside of the gender binary male and female. And I present masculine at the workplace, and so they didn't know that my pronouns were they, them, and that I indeed identified outside of the gender binary, but yet still felt comfortable to make the jokes in front of me. So I didn't feel like I could come out and share my pronouns. And so when I went to do the training with Residence Life, I introduced myself, started with the training, and then somebody in the audience, a very eager student, raised their hand and said, Dr. John, you introduced yourself, but you didn't share your pronouns. We all share our pronouns when we introduce each other. We want to make sure that we understand and we know what your pronouns are, so we know how to refer to you appropriately. And I had to take a step back because in that moment, either my choice was to lie to a room of people who I'm asking to be safe spaces and to do this amazing, DEI work and allow folks to show up authentically as themselves and to honor that. So lying didn't feel like a good option for me. And I also, in that moment, didn't feel like I could be out because I didn't want word to travel around campus that, John identifies as non-binary, their pronouns are they, them, and their, and to have it get back to the workplace and somehow impact my employment. And so I didn't know what to do. But in that instance where I'm trying to create safe space, I just went, you're right. I didn't introduce myself with my pronouns. Thank you for noticing. And then I went right back on with my training. But I didn't, necessarily stop and explain that there's an issue here. And there really is an issue that we need to spend some time, I think, digging into and really figuring out that sharing pronouns is a privilege for those who are out and who are comfortable, and especially for those who identify their gender identity is in accordance with their gender that was assigned at birth. And it's great that this discussion is happening, and I think it really did help me finally come out. If it hadn't been for colleagues who are willing to share their pronouns. But at the same time, there's this transition phase where it doesn't always feel safe. We've got to figure out a way to allow folks to still authentically be themselves and to show up in spaces without having to lie about who they are. So we have to, I think, figure out a way to honor silence and to also acknowledge people may not be comfortable sharing their pronouns with us. And so, yeah, it's a great question, Kevin, but it's not an easy answer because you're even though we want to know someone's pronouns, depending on where they're at in their coming out process or their feeling of safety and comfort in the climate, they may be hesitant to ask, and we're putting them in a really split-second decision of do I trust who I'm talking to and can I come out, or do I have to lie, and then do I have to because that's heavy, right? Lying about who I am is heavy. It has huge implications. So I think, yeah, we've got to spend some time unpacking where that is. So I think the intention behind pronouns is great, but I don't think it always works.
Yeah, it's a bigger question than maybe sort of it looks at first blush.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
How do I know what pronouns to use for myself? What if I'm comfortable with my sex assigned at birth, but I'm also comfortable with they, them pronouns?
Yeah. You have the right to identify and use pronouns that feel comfortable for you. So even if you feel like your inner sense of who you are aligns with your sex that was assigned at birth, and yet you feel more comfortable using they them pronouns, there is room in all gender spectrum, like everyone who falls on the gender spectrum, to show up how they authentically wish to show up. And I would see and honor that person by saying, your pronouns are they, them, and their, and I honor that and can recognize and see that. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. What if I only feel safe using certain pronouns around certain groups and not others? You kind of hit it on this, I think, in your previous answer. But
yeah, I did. And so I think the important thing is that you let folks know where you're truly comfortable being your authentic selves, that you let them know that there are spaces that you are not yet comfortable so that they can help protect you if you're in other situations that they happen to also be in. So they're not outing you without, without meaning to, right? And so just like Kevin, if you and I were in a conversation and I said, Kevin, I'm comfortable identifying as non-binary with you. Truly, my pronouns are they, them, and their. But when we go into this meeting, the colleagues who made jokes, they don't know about my identity. You would honor that, right? And
Right.
we would just navigate without using pronouns. And there are so many ways we can have conversations and refer to people without even using pronouns that still honor who they are. Um, but yeah, I think it's all about communication and allies and working together to make sure that I can navigate the different complex situations safely.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the other end of that, right? Is that for me in this scenario, my responsibility is also to check in and say, John, I know you identify as non-binary. I know you use they, them. Are you comfortable in this space doing that as
Yes,
well and not making the assumption?
correct. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How do I get people to respect my pronouns?
That's on them. So I think as heavy of a burden as it is just being authentically ourselves and honoring ourselves in the world, those of us who identify outside of the non-binary, I think we have to let the work of respect fall to the other person and know that there are resources that we can go to. For example, Kevin, we can go to Kevin and say, there are folks that I'm having to interact with that aren't recognizing and respecting my pronouns. And then there are resources that the institution can help ensure that your pronouns then are respected.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So there's enough burden trying to, especially for students, trying to navigate an academic experience without the addition of their gender, making things a little more complicated, that we really need to make sure that there are resources in place to help when they are not being respected.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that, and that's the end of our questions right now. So let me start there.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the themes that we're focusing on this year is a quote from Grace Lee Boggs, which is to transform yourself to transform the world. And so I think that you've given us a great deal, John, to think about how we can continue to focus on ourselves, to transform and do our own work, and how that can ultimately push against some of these multifaceted cultural sort of kind of issues. And hopefully we can continue to move Alma to be as inclusive, as much of a home for all people as we want it to be.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, John. Always a pleasure.
It was great. It was great to talk to Kevin.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.